It is 2 a.m. on October 22nd, 9329 NGY. Svava and Velius land on the planet Velen, and proscolors, masking themselves as just boring people, and they approach the massive compound where the bleak horrors are being imprisoned and experimented upon. Velius looks to Svava and says, "Is this truly what we have been doing here, Skald? How utterly inhumane. Perhaps we can simply speak with Meliora and work this out?" Svava glowers. "If speaking worked, comrade, we wouldn't be here. Trust me when I tell you I've thoroughly exhausted speaking in conventional ways. It's time, old friend, to begin speaking unconventionally." Velius sighs. "I do trust you." Svava grunts. "I know. You wouldn't be here if I didn't feel the same way." Svava jacks into the system Deliverance uses to control the bleak horrors using some technology that Svava's ex-wife Freya worked out once Ark got a sample of the tech from Velius and gave it to Freya. Svava confirms that they've seized full control of the system and now have full access, and she remarks that her wife is a bit too brilliant sometimes. Velius rumbles and responds that he's found that wives are often too brilliant. Svava smiles, but hesitates. "What's the wait?" "I don't want to force it. I don't want to make them flee into our shuttles. I want them to choose freedom for themselves." "As do I. But how will they even know that choice is available to them?" "We tell them." "How?" "Just make them do it, Skald. We can work it out after the fact." Svava looks to him gravely. "No, comrade. I will not be making them do anything. Know that all that I am about to do is absolutely necessary." "Skald, I don't understand. How are we going to get them to make the right choice if we don't force them to? We haven't been able to discover a way to speak to them." Svava looks back to her tablet, and she replies, "Actions speak louder than words." Velius's eyes widen, and his ears fold back, because that's exactly what she said before she gathered up a force and struck off to deliver a solution on Dinhark. It's what she said before she surrendered to a motley army banded under the leadership of a 12-year-old girl. Svava overloads the Brainjack system, shorting it out, blacking it out, and the bleak horrors are instantly unshackled. Svava stands back and watches from her tablet as Velius puts his body between her and the high walls to separate them from the bleak horrors instinctually. They watch through their tablets in awe as the bleak horrors, which were just aimlessly pacing about like beasts moments earlier, suddenly jerk to a stop and then immediately rush towards each other from where they were separated originally into small packs of 4 or 5. Now, hundreds of them swarm to each other, claws out, bristling with rage, and Svava grimaces, expecting them to just start blendering each other as Deliverance panics and starts trying to get the system back on. But the bleak horrors do not blender each other. They headbutt and nuzzle each other like cats, and then they network up into groups of 9 to 12, each of them becoming a psionic personality. They soundlessly mind blast through the Deliverance forces, rendering the Overseers catatonic via a psychic shockwave. Svava gasps. She pulls her tablet away and rushes to her mech as Velius gapes in horror at his own tablet, watching the bleak horrors, attempting to build a human ladder to get themselves out of their enclosure while the alarm sounds and the entirety of the Deliverance forces in the base respond. Deliverance had no idea the bleak horrors were psionic, let alone that they were, or could be, this psionic. The Deliverance forces start firing on the bleak horrors. They'd rather have the bleak horrors dead than free. And Psionics aren't immune to bullets and lasers. Two Bleak Horror units of 9 to 12 turn to face that army that has taken the high ground to slaughter them, and they network together into a psionic personality comprised of 23 Bleak Horrors as a song starts to blast towards them at full volume from Svava's Barbarossa, and it increases in volume as Svava approaches. Svava slams into the wall and begins shredding into it while throwing up a sympathetic shield between the Bleak Horrors and the firing Deliverance. Now the damage from the bullets and the lasers is redirected onto her mech. But while the Bleak Horrors can see that the shield has gone up and the effects it's having, there's still a wall between them and Svava, so they don't know where it's coming from. Deliverance starts to mech up, joining the fray in Caliban's, Nelson's, and Vlad's mostly. Velius announces, "Oh, fuck," and he gets into his Sherman and melts through the wall that Svava's hammering at, his Sherman glowing with heat. And now that the Bleak Horrors can see where the shield and song is coming from, they freeze again in a moment of uncertainty. Svava opens up her channels and announces over the loudspeaker, "I hope this translator works." Her comms are shut off as an EMP rips through the compound and shuts everything non-Deliverance and mechanical down, which shuts off all the mechanics in the Bleak Horrors, alongside Svava and Velius' mech. It also shuts off the song. Now it's just Svava and Velius in their mechs and a few thousand Bleak Horrors against several hundred Deliverance in mechs. "Are you happy with yourself now, Skald?" asks Velius. "I'll be happy when the job is done, Roar." Svava suddenly feels a knocking in her brain. She panics and lets it in. The 23 Bleak Horror personality that combined itself earlier speaks telepathically with her. "We are, as a people, Garad. We are, as an entity, Ryland. Where is free?" And Svava thinks really hard back at Ryland, the coordinates of the ships awaiting them. "Understood." The voice, for lack of a better word, replies. Svava fusses with her mech and gets the sound system back up, and she starts a different song as she struggles to get her mech back under control. The bulk of the Garat react not just to that song, but to some kind of unspoken communication they're having, and they rush off towards the awaiting ships, unified in purpose. But 269 Garat stay back, because some more unspoken communication has happened, and 23 of those are Ryland. They turn towards Deliverance and face them, and 3 groups of 71, it's 213, form. The remaining 56 are now Ryland. They launch themselves at the mechs as they cover their people's escape. Deliverance unloads on them, killing off members of the groups, which makes them incrementally less smart and less self-aware as their partners perish. They rip into Deliverance with psionics, and they start psychically shielding themselves in desperation as Svava and Velius finally manage to boot back up their mechs. And that's when Boundless finally makes its presence known, as General Ulysses drops in with his mech, a Barbarossa named the Heavy Breaker, and 2 scout mechs. Up until this point, Boundless had been scanning the Bleak Horrors to pretend they're trying to figure out what their deal is, but really they were just looking for an opening, which Svava just gave them, so they begin their assault the moment that music from Svava started. The Nimish show up, 29 mechs in total, and a navy blue painted Nimish mech blasts Svava with a gun, turning her invisible, and then they ignore her. They join the fray as Deliverance react with confusion at the chaos. They have no idea who these new mech pilots are. Svava and Belius get their mechs under control, and it's just a bloodbath. Every Deliverance soldier and mech starts to get gunned down or ripped apart, and Belius actually protests this and starts to bark orders because he's not a Wooloo, he's Deliverance. Ryland is still in Svava's brain, and as the Deliverance forces finally start breaking and retreating, Ryland turns and charges Velius, hammering into his Sherman and ripping him out of it with her, Ryland goes by she, her pronouns, prying claws where everyone can see it. And then, to all onlookers, he is just obliterated. He is shredded into nothingness by a psychic assault. But, in truth, that's just what she projects as real, and she instead breaks apart, 9 of her carrying Belius, who is now unconscious, to Boundless. And when Belius is being torn from his mech, Ulysses will fire an apocalypse rail, which anyone who's psychic will know about, and he will be pretending to fire at that mob tearing Belius's mech apart, but it'll be conveniently too late to ensure people witness Belius die. It will, however, give some good smokescreen for any escapees, wink, and this allows Ryland to hand Belius off to Boundless, and then she turns back towards the fray, only for a hand to clap onto the shoulder of one of the many Garrots comprising her. She turns to this Boundless representative and knocks on their mind. They let her in, and after only a few short moments, her eyes widen and she joins them in the shuttle. The Boundless scouts will bring whoever they can back to the heavy breaker, and Boundless will secure an escape route and then begin escaping themselves. As the 34 remaining Garrots that comprised Ryland, 13 died in the aforementioned Deliverance counterattack, turn on Svava, the Nimish, and everyone else to make it look like she's gone berserk. The rest of the Garrots join her. Svava's Barbarossa comes apart under the combined assault of Deliverance forces' counterattack, 50% of which miss because she's invisible, and the Garrots' assault, which hit her 100% of the time because they know where she is. Svava is confused, but Ryland knows the whole situation now because she's still in Svava's head. Ryland and the Garrots drive Svava and the remaining non-Deliverance forces into retreat, and then annihilate almost the entirety of the Deliverance forces, who go down fighting, as Svava, the Nimish, and whatever Boundless forces showed up fall over themselves running. Of the 269 Vanguard Garrots that chose to secure the escape of their people, 9 leave as Ryland, and 244 die for real in Deliverance's last stand, as the Garrots are shredded down, while they use psionics to make the fact that a prison riot due to a brief tech glitch that set the Bleak Wars loose for 10 minutes was the reality of what happened here. The ships and shuttles never came. Belius, but nobody else showed up to attempt to restore order, and was instead wiped out of existence by the Bleak Horrors. And Deliverance had no choice but to put down all the Bleak Horrors in the riot, and they are now extinct. This becomes the undeniable truth of what happened here. And the 11 remaining Garrots now stand before what remains of the Deliverance forces, who have just had their memories overwritten with that manufactured, undeniable truth of what happened here today. Having broken their cultural taboo against shredding brains non-consensually, the 11 remaining Garrots will will themselves out of existence, and they are gone. 31 Deliverance soldiers are left to gaze around at the hot mess here and mourn Belius. They draw straws to see who makes the report to command. And the 9 Garrots that are all that's left of Ryland now know what the rest of the 269 did. But the Garrots are free, and Deliverance still has no idea they're psionic, just that a bunch of them vaporized Belius. The Bleak Horrors are extinct now. And that's a good thing.